Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be thinking about how to identify key changes in music. Now, some people might think, do I need to know about this kind of stuff? Well, at one level you don't particularly, but if you are a performing musician, it's one thing that is actually telling you something about the emotional journey of the music. If you think about it, music is not anything that's static. We are emotion. From the first note to the last, the listener is being taken on a musical journey. Now, what are the markers in this journey? Well, they could be melodic, they could be rhythmic, they could be about changes in instruments, changes in tempo, changes in volume, changes in articulation. They could be about lots of things. But one of the things is modulation, that we start in one key and then we change to another key. When do these key changes occur? And if I become more aware of them as a performer, then I can find ways of painting them. So it becomes a useful thing in interpretation to understand modulation, key changes. Modulation is just a posh word for key changes. And also, if you're a composer, you'll soon discover that if you just write a whole piece of music in one key, it gets a bit boring after a while, actually, and you begin to feel a little bit aimless on your musical journey. Like, well, there's more notes coming at me, more chords coming at me, but we're not kind of going anywhere. So it's quite an important thing to build in to your writing if you're writing music that belongs to the tonal style. In other words, it's in a major or a minor key. So let's have a think about a piece of music that I've written that includes a number of key changes. I'll play you the piece first of all. It's the one that's on our screen here. Okay, well, first of all, we need to know what the home key is. So if we've got two sharps in the key signature, well, we're either in D major or we're in the relative minor, B minor. Now, if you're now pausing to think, well, how do you know that? Let me point you to a video we've got available to you on the circle of fifths, which explains all the keys, which sharps, which flats we need for keys. And then that would just help you to be sure about keys. I'm assuming that you've got an idea about keys before we move on. So if that's a bit of a mystery, have a look at our circle of fifths video, then come back to this and it will all make a lot of sense. So the thing is, if two sharps means we're either in the key of D major or B minor, well, how do we know? Well, if you were in B minor, you might find that the seventh degree of the scale is sometimes raised. Well, the seventh degree of B minor is A, so do we see A sharps around at the beginning? Well, not really. There's an A natural there, there's an A natural there, there's an A natural there, there's an A natural. So actually quite a lot of A natural. So that's not really suggesting B minor. We might see some raised sixth degrees, some G sharps. Do I see any G sharps now? Well, there's a G natural there. There is a G sharp along here, but then we're already kind of into the piece by then, aren't we? What about the first chord? Is that a chord that looks as if it's something to do with D major or something to do with B minor? Well, it's a D, F sharp, A chord. So it's looking like a chord 1 or a tonic chord in D major. So a chord of D major. It finishes on a chord of D major, chord 1. So it's kind of suggesting really lots of evidence pointing to the piece of music fundamentally being in D major. Okay, well, let's sort of start our journey through the piece and see if we can identify where these key changes come. So I'm going to play the first line, the first 4 bars, the first 4 measures. And first of all, just can you hear if there is a key change? Okay, now can you hear something's happened there, isn't it? You kind of feel, oh, we've gone somewhere. It's not just a melody, but something's kind of gone oomph and we've gone somewhere else. And it's really all about this G sharp, isn't it? And you're thinking, well, if we're in the key of D major, why would there be a G sharp in it? Well, let's consider this. We start off in two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. If for some reason we were going to add the third sharp would be G sharp. You can see that on the circle of fifths. The key that's got two sharps is D major, or its relative key, B minor. The next key round on the circle of fifths is A major, and A major's got these two sharps, F sharp and C sharp, and it's got G sharp. So A major is a fifth higher than D major. So we've gone up 5 keys. We've gone to what we call the dominant key, the dominant meaning fifth. So we've got a G sharp here, which is pushing us into A major. And lo and behold, the next chord is a chord of A major. So we've got A, C sharp, E, A major chord, or chord 1 in the key of A major. So at the beginning, we were in D major, and by the time we get to the end of the first phrase, we're in A major. And that's happened because we've added that G sharp. Now, how do we kind of go from D major to A major without it sounding like, whoops, we've just jumped into the wrong key? Well, often we use something called a pivot chord. And if you have a look at this chord here, this is a B minor chord, B, D, F sharp. Those are the notes of that chord that I've got on the second beat of this bar, this measure. Now in D major, that B minor chord, B, D, F sharp, is chord 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in A major, it's chord 2, because in A major, this is chord 1, this is chord 2. So when you want to have a key change, often the way you do it is you use something called a pivot chord. So it's a chord that belongs to the key that you're leaving and also belongs to the key that you're joining. So this is a pivot chord that makes for a nice smooth change into A major. We haven't just suddenly slammed into A major, we've used a pivot chord. So have a listen to that first phrase again, starting in D major with a key change to A major at the end of that first line, that first phrase. And if you can feel that key change, it's already encouraging you to play it in a certain sort of way. Because if that first line had all been in D major, well, that sounds absolutely fine, doesn't it? But we haven't kind of gone anywhere yet. You can feel this key change taking us somewhere. So when you play it, try to play it with a slight element of surprise. So the listener's going, oh, I wasn't expecting that to happen. Aha! Surprise, surprise. We're in a different key. So here we are at the end of the first phrase in the key of A major. And we know that's happened because the G sharp comes there, and that's the next sharp in the order of the circle of fifths that represents A major, and we can see and hear a pivot chord there. Okay, now this is the tonic chord, chord 1 in A major, but it's also chord 5 in D major. So maybe that's going to be a pivot chord back to D major, because the next chord we hear is a D major chord. So if I now play from here, we're in D major, pivot chord, into A major. This A major chord is now pivot chord back to D major. So that's how we've gone back there. Now, something happens next. But before we talk about the detail of that, let me play you this second line. And can you hear any key change? How many key changes did you hear? Did you hear any at all? Did you hear 1? Did you hear 2? because it's one of those options. There are two key changes in this second phrase. So just in this 4-bar span, this 4-measure phrase, we've got two key changes. Let's have a little think about what's going on. Well, we've said we've started in D major, but then this A sharp creeps in. Now then, that's a little bit confusing at first, because we said that in the circle of fifths, if you have two sharps, F sharp and C sharp, if you had a third sharp, it would be G sharp. Well, that's what we saw there when we went to A major. But A sharp actually is the fifth sharp. So if you're on the circle of fifths, you'll find that A sharp is the fifth sharp to be added. So if we've got A sharp, surely we should have F sharp, C sharp, then we should have G sharp, the third sharp, then we should have D sharp, the fourth sharp, then we should have A sharp, the fifth sharp. So if that was happening, that would be helping us to think we're in a major key. But if you're thinking, well, this is a bit strange, we seem to have F sharp and C sharp, but now we've got A sharp without those intervening sharps. You know, we can't really kind of see a G sharp or a D sharp. And in fact, we've very clearly got D naturals. So we've got the first two sharps and we've got the fifth sharp, and we've lost the third and the fourth sharp. Now that's usually telling you one thing, that we've gone into a minor key. Okay, now if we've gone into a minor key, what's the most likely minor key? We said back at the beginning that two sharps means you're either in D major or you're in the relative minor of B minor. And if you're in B minor and you're using the harmonic minor scale, we raise the seventh note, the seventh degree of the scale. Well, in B minor, I'm going B, C sharp from the key signature, D, E, F sharp from the key signature, G. Here comes the seventh note, A. I'm going to call it A sharp to go to B. So I get So if I've just got these two sharps and I've got A sharp without the intervening sharps, that's probably telling me I'm going to B minor. Okay, let's look at the next chord. Lo and behold, the next chord is a chord of B minor. It's using B, D, F sharp. So it's chord 1 in the key of B minor, or a B minor chord. So what am I doing? I'm starting the line with this D major chord. Then I've got this A sharp coming in that's taking me to B minor. So we started in D major here, we modulated to A major there, we came back to D major, now we're going to B minor, the relative minor. But this is not the last modulation of the line, because when we get to this point, C natural. What's C natural doing there? Well, let's have a think about this. Our key signature is F sharp and C sharp. So if we've got C natural, effectively what we're doing is cancelling this C sharp, isn't it? So now we've got a key that only has F sharp in it. Go back to your circle of fifths, you'll find that that's telling us that we're either in G major or we're in the relative minor of G major, which is E minor. Now again, if you're in E minor, you might expect to see the seventh note of the scale being raised. Well, in E minor, the seventh note of the scale is D, so that might be becoming D sharp. Well, sorry, but we've got D natural. We've got D natural again there. We've got D natural here. So it's not looking like E minor. Well, that being the case, is it G major? When we look at the next chord, this is, lo and behold, a chord of G major, G, B, D. So that's what's happening there. We've modulated to B minor there. And now in the second half of this phrase, we're modulating to G major, known as the subdominant key. D major is the first, G is the fourth degree of that scale, so it's the subdominant, but it's G major. Okay, now what happens thereafter? It's all getting too exciting with these key changes, isn't it? When I look at the last line, let's play it. Do you hear any modulation? Doesn't seem to be any modulation. So we had one modulation in the first line, we had two modulations in the second line, none at all in the third line. That's kind of what you might expect during the course of a piece of music. So what's going on there last night? There are no sharps, flats, naturals, anything to indicate a key change. So we seem to be comfortably back home in D major. How did we get there? G major is a pivot chord. It's chord 1 in G major, but it's also chord 4 in D major. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is your pivot chord that's taking us back to the key of D major. Okay, so that's how it works. So hopefully that's given a bit of insight into, if you're writing a piece of music, well, how do you actually factor in key changes? How do you write them into the music? If you're playing a piece of music, how can you hear the key changes? And how do you know what those key changes are? And then you can have a think about, okay, what kind of emotional journey is this taking us on? How do I kind of paint those little surprises of the key changes? Which key changes seem to be more important than other key changes? You know, it's asking yourself all these questions so that you can really paint those into your interpretation. So let's have a listen to the whole thing. So we start in D major. Pivot, A major. Pivot back to D major, into B minor. Now into G major, and that's a pivot back to D major, where we stay for the rest of the piece. So I hope that's a very useful little tutorial in how to identify key changes in music. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, let me invite you to take a little trip to the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. You'll find on the homepage there lots of resources available to you, courses, our Maestro's program that you might be interested in joining, merch if you want to buy a t-shirt or a coffee cup or something with useful musical intelligence on it, or reminders about your links to Music Matters. But go on courses and have a little look at what is there, because there are all sorts of things that are useful to composers and to performers on there. One of our courses there is called How to Compose Using Sonata Form. So if you're a performer and you're playing pieces of music in sonata form and you're not quite sure what sonata form is, that will make it crystal clear for you. If you're a composer and you're thinking, I'm great at writing kind of short pieces, but I need to kind of work on a bigger canvas, that will be really useful for you to think about. And of course, as part of learning about sonata form, you do much more work on key changes and how to structure those into a piece of music that you might be writing. So it's picking up this theme as well. But there are many other resources there available to you. www.mmcourses.co.uk.